Close your eyes and picture an angel. You already know what you see. White wings, a glowing halo, a gentle face, maybe a harp, maybe a chubby baby floating on a cloud. That image is everywhere. Christmas cards, tattoos, movies. There's just one problem. Almost none of it comes from the Bible. The angels in the actual text are so strange, so alarming, that the first thing they usually say is, "Do not be afraid." And they say it because people are terrified. So where did the greeting card version come from? And what do the biblical writers actually describe? The answer is weirder than you think. Start with the word itself. In Hebrew, it's malach. In Greek, it's angelos. Both simply mean messenger. That's it. Not a species with wings. Not a glowing being. A job title. A messenger from God could look like anything. And in most of the Bible, when angels show up to deliver a message, they look like ordinary men. In Genesis 18, 3 visitors arrive at Abraham's tent. They walk. They talk. They eat a meal of bread, curds, and roasted calf. Nothing about wings, nothing about light. Abraham treats them like travelers because that's exactly what they appear to be. 2 of them go on to Sodom in Genesis 19, and the men of the city see nothing unusual about them either. The book of Hebrews, chapter 13, verse 2, even warns that some people have hosted angels without knowing it. You can't do that with a halo. So where do the wings come from? Different creatures entirely. The Bible describes several kinds of heavenly beings, and here's the twist. The ones with wings are almost never called angels, and the ones called angels are almost never described with wings. Take the cherubim. Forget the fat babies. The word cherub in the text describes something closer to a monster. In Ezekiel chapter 1 and chapter 10, the prophet sees cherubim with 4 faces each: a human, a lion, an ox, and an eagle. 4 wings, feet like calves' hooves that gleam like polished bronze. They move alongside wheels that are covered in eyes. Ezekiel doesn't say they're beautiful. He falls on his face. The very first time cherubim appear in the Bible, in Genesis 3, verse 24, they're stationed at the entrance of Eden with a flaming, whirling sword to keep humans out. They're guards. Ancient Near Eastern temples and palaces had the same idea. Massive winged hybrid creatures, part human, part animal, carved at the gates as supernatural security. Archaeologists have dug up these statues across Mesopotamia. The biblical writers were describing something their whole world would recognize. Then there are the seraphim. They appear in exactly one scene, Isaiah chapter 6. 6 wings each. 2 cover their faces, 2 cover their feet, 2 fly. The name itself likely comes from the Hebrew word for burning. Biblical scholar Esther Hamori, who teaches Hebrew Bible at Union Theological Seminary, points out in her book God's Monsters that the same word describes venomous serpents elsewhere in Scripture. The beings praising God in Isaiah's vision may be something like flaming serpent creatures. Isaiah's response? He doesn't smile. He says, "Woe is me, I am ruined." That's the consistent pattern. In Daniel chapter 10, Daniel sees a heavenly being with a face like lightning and eyes like flaming torches, and every drop of strength leaves his body. In Luke chapter 2, when an angel appears to shepherds outside Bethlehem, the text says they were terrified. The Christmas story, skips over the fear. Here's something else the text does that most readers miss. It talks about a whole staff, not just messengers, but a court. Psalm 82 opens with God standing in the divine council, holding judgment among the gods. Job chapter 1 describes a day when the sons of God come to present themselves before the Lord. The late biblical scholar Michael Heiser, in his book The Unseen Realm, argued that the biblical writers pictured a structured, heavenly bureaucracy, a council, ranks, assignments, even beings who rebel. That's not later church invention. It's sitting right there in the Hebrew text, and it reframes the famous phrase from Luke's Nativity, a multitude of the heavenly host. Host is a military word. It means army. The sky over Bethlehem wasn't filled with a choir. It was filled with soldiers announcing peace. Now for the misconception that might surprise you most. How many angels does the Bible actually name? In the Protestant Bible, 2. Gabriel, who delivers messages in Daniel and in Luke, and Michael, called an archangel, who fights. That's the whole list. Raphael appears only in the book of Tobit, which is in Catholic and Orthodox Bibles but not Protestant ones. Every other angel name you've heard came from somewhere else. And the halo? It never appears in the text at all. Art historians trace it to Greco-Roman art, where gods and emperors were painted with radiant crowns. Christian artists borrowed the visual centuries later. It stuck so hard that it rewrote everyone's imagination. And one more, the big one. People do not become angels when they die. No verse says it, not one. Grandma is not earning her wings. In the Bible, angels and humans are simply different categories of creature. Hebrews chapter 1 spends its entire opening arguing that even Jesus is superior to the angels, quoting Psalm 8, which places humans a little lower than the heavenly beings. Different rank, different role, different beings. The idea that the dead turn into angels comes from folklore and sentimental fiction, not from anything a biblical writer wrote. Why does that matter? Because it shows how completely the popular picture has replaced the text. Most people's mental image of an angel contains a Greek halo, a Renaissance body, a Victorian sentiment, and a Hollywood glow, with almost nothing left from the Bible underneath. So what is left when you strip all that away? Something far more unsettling and far more interesting. Messengers who look like strangers at your door. Guardian monsters with 4 faces and flaming swords. Burning 6-winged creatures that make prophets collapse. A structured heavenly army with named commanders and rebellious members. Being so overwhelming that the first word out of their mouths has to be a command not to panic. The biblical writers weren't describing comfort. They were describing contact with something utterly beyond human categories, and they reached for the strangest images their language could hold. Which brings it back to you. The next time someone says a loved one became an angel, or you see a chubby cherub on a Valentine, you'll know the strange truth sitting underneath the sentiment. Close your eyes and picture an angel one more time. If what you see now has 4 faces, burning wings, and wheels covered in eyes, you're no longer picturing the greeting card. You're finally picturing the Bible.